Hi, I'm Stephen Van Tassel. You're listening to Living the Wildlife, discussing all things related to vertebrate pest control as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek podcast for the Living the Wildlife podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen M. Van Tassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here. Hi, this is Stephen Van Tassel, host of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek Podcast family. We are now just introducing you here to part 2 of our interview with Tate Morgan, president of Lead Squirrel, a marketing firm. So if you're listening to me now and you haven't listened to part 1, you might want to stop and go back and listen to part 1, because this is part 2 of our interview with Tate Morgan. So if you are watching this and this is part 2 for you and that you've already seen part 1, well, welcome aboard. I hope you've had a great week. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel. Do give us ring the bell, and of course, if you can give us a 5-star review, we would be most grateful. If you also can download our podcast through Rumble, just go to Wildlife Control Consultant at the Rumble site, and you can get my podcast there as well. Do join us on Facebook if you would. We have the Pest Geek Podcast family there on Facebook. Join the revolution, as Franklin calls it, a place where you can tout your successes and your failures, and of course your questions as well. We'd love to have you on board. So this is basically a podcast dedicated to people involved in the vertebrate pest community, vertebrate pest control community. And so it's a place where we share ideas and learn, and that's what this podcast is all about. And so stay tuned now, if you would, as we get to start with Tate Morgan, who is the president of Lead Squirrel. You can learn more about him at leadsquirrel.org, and also Animal Control marketing.com. That's animal control marketing.com. Here we are with part 2. Would that be a location where someone would put in whatever charitable work that they would do if they were, the coach of the local baseball team, or that sort of thing, where they were volunteering or something, that you'd want the idea of trying to embed yourself into the community, and like you're not going anywhere. Is that the idea?
I think that's an excellent place to do something like that. If you're, especially if, so the 5th core pillar of our marketing system, right, is strategic communications. And so you mentioned the baseball team. I just have to, kind of loop back to that. One of my favorite things to recommend is, if you've got a community little league, sponsor a team. Make sure one of those teams has your name on it. It's a small little thing, but it really, it solidifies your place in the community.
What does that cost? Do you have an idea what that costs? I have no idea what that costs.
It depends on the community, right? I mean, there's I think, in my neighborhood, so I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and some of the suburbs, you can sponsor a team for, I think, $200-$300 for a season.
Oh, wow, that's nothing. That's cheap.
Oh my gosh. There's some other ones where you sponsor a team for $1,000 or $2,000, and
it's still cheap.
They take that money, and then they buy their uniforms with it and all that. So there's tangible benefits both to the team and to the business when you do something like that.
And plus, you're getting all those parents from all the other teams, because they're seeing that name multiple times, and then it gets into community bulletins and calendars. I would think that's cheap as all get out.
And if you really want to be tactical and take advantage of doing something like that, and this is a great tip for anyone who, regardless of whether or not you are on a particular marketing program or anything, if you do something like that, one of the best things you can do is write up a quick press release and send it to the editors of every local newspaper, and just say, this business, the format of your press release should be, this business partners with local community baseball team to further, community engagement, or something like that. Go out, catch a game, shake hands with the coach, get a picture with the coach, run that as a press release. One local publication is going to pick that up.
Yeah.
They will. Because everyone's looking for something to write about. Someone will cover that. And now you've got local press. And if they've got a digital publication, meaning their newspapers online, they're going to link back to your website. And now you've got a local backlink, which is huge for SEO.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that that go overlooked, that everyone thinks it's all this tactical stuff and nerdy stuff online, when in reality, there's no magic or special sauce behind marketing and advertising. It's just being a normal human being
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and showing people that you exist in a way that it provides some decent value to people.
Without a doubt. I think that's certainly, and I think those neighborhood newspapers would definitively pick that up, especially if the team was based in that particular community. I think that is absolutely huge. And there's something about that. Yeah, I think it's a great idea without a doubt. So the question I was asking in terms of the services page, do you recommend that the wildlife control operator write broadly, or should the person write narrowly? In other words, should they write down every service they could potentially do, even if they're not necessarily comfortable with it? Or should they only put in that list what they are like, yeah, that I'm rock solid on this?
I think that's going to depend entirely on location, so region, and truthfully what the operator is comfortable with.
Okay.
There's some guys who there's some companies who are more than happy to take every bat and raccoon job that comes their way. But if armadillo rolls their way, they might not want to mess with it.
Right.
Or so there's always like that one specific thing that it's like we don't necessarily want to play with that. Just about every state has some restrictions on whether or not you can do anything with cats and dogs. And so
right.
And so some there's a lot of people who don't want to show up for those at all, or in some cases maybe people do. So I think that's going to depend entirely on what your intention is. I think if you want the best results from your website, as long as it's structured properly, meaning you're not just throwing them in a comma separated list. So you're not just uploading and writing a block of text that just says we do raccoons and bats and squirrels and possums and armadillos. Have a section on that page that's raccoon removal, and write a little bit about how you help with raccoons. Have a section that's bat removal, and write a little bit about how you can help with bats. If you have enough information to write about what you would do if someone called you for those things, list that on your website.
Okay. How long does it take typically for someone to start seeing results? Is it 2 months, 3 months, and when they're doing that campaign and they're starting this process, when should they start seeing a return on investment in that would be a reasonable expectation? Obviously it's not going to be in 5 minutes. Why haven't I become a millionaire yet? But
right,
how much time does someone really need to give it to see if this is working?
Ideally, when we work with somebody, we want you to know within the first 30 days if it's going to be a good fit or not. And
okay, that's fast. All right.
Bottom line is what determines whether or not something will be a good fit.
Okay.
And so the first 30 days with us on that at that $4.99 point, right, is 3 weeks of website build. So you don't really have a lot of time to gauge whether or not paid search is going to pay off in that time frame.
Right.
But for $4.99 in that first month, even if you don't have a tangible ROI based outcome, you've got your website built. You've got a core asset in place at realistically a price point that is unbeatable compared to just about every other professional developer. But we have a very, very, very low churn rate, which is why when we offer someone a $4.99 website, it's because we're confident that they will appreciate the level of communication we deliver, and that second month that they come around and they've got ads rolling, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, this was worth it.
This is working. And so how much time So clearly there's going to be time on your side where you're actually implementing the work onto the
Mhm.
website. So how much time do you need with the client to get the information you need from the client to make those changes? So what kind of, so the person has a financial investment with your company, what
Mhm.
kind of time investment with the company would they need to, with your company, would they need to make in order to make sure you're empowered with the right information you need to do your, your marketing work?
It is very, very minimal. I
Okay.
mean, so generally speaking, we have a kickoff call, which
Hmm.
is 45 minutes or so. It can be longer, it can be shorter, but 45 minutes or so of just having a conversation about the things you care the most about and the
Yeah.
areas that are most important to you. One of the biggest differentiators that we have been able to take advantage of is that I have personally been working with wildlife removal and pest control companies for, a number of years, but my first hires outside of myself, I made sure was a business development representative who
Hmm.
was a former door-to-door pest salesman,
Wow.
and the next guy was a former Ohio DNR. So he's
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
All right.
so
So you got some people with some experience then.
so the reason that was important to me when we started getting all of this set up, right, is I didn't want there to be there's so many people who hire an agency and they find out that that agency was paying to send them cat and dog calls.
Right.
And
Right.
I didn't
Right.
ever want that to be the case. I didn't want someone to talk to us and say, these guys have no idea, because there's so many agencies out there that'll gladly take your money and they'll put up cookie cutter Google Ads campaigns
Hmm.
or build a cookie cutter website, and they rank you for the wrong things. You end up showing up for wildlife sanctuary and
Yeah.
a whole
Yeah.
number of things. And anyone who's hired an agency who isn't specialized knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the benefit to that is that client involvement is very low. And generally, what we like to say is we don't require it to be low. If you want to be involved and you want to learn more and you want to have a weekly call, we're happy to walk you through what we're doing.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we have our monthly engagement where we sit down and have a conversation and we break down what the numbers look like. But we don't want to take you out of the field because
Right.
that's where you're making your money.
Hmm.
And so your level of involvement and engagement is entirely up to you. But what we actually need from you is maybe an hour at the start and an open line of communication to answer questions if we have them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Respond to your email.
Yeah, that's important. That is important.
Right.
I
Right.
can't tell you how many times we've run into, we'll have an ad campaign going and we'll see someone had searched snake, for instance,
Mhm.
and I send an email out and I'm like, hey, we didn't touch on snakes in our kickoff
Right.
call. Do you guys want snake calls? And then I
Right.
don't hear back for 3 months.
Yeah.
I'm
It's just,
like, okay,
it's the
we,
void,
they, they,
just,
they might, they might get snake calls for the next couple of months. So,
but it's still
it's,
your fault, by the way. Just
oh,
so you know, it's
a
still your
hundred
fault that
percent.
they don't call you back.
Well, and so that, having both brand side experience and agency side experience, I'm
Yeah.
empathetic to what's happening, right? I'm empathetic to
Sure.
people who are out in the field. And so I
Right. Right.
totally get that. And so generally we err on the side of caution because
Right.
we don't want it to ever come back and, have a situation where it's like, well, why were you guys sending us snake calls? It's like,
Right.
well,
Right. Right.
how do you have that conversation, right? And so for us, it's a function of again, one of the things that I said causes agencies to fizzle out is under communication.
Yeah.
We over communicate things. If we think that something is wrong or we don't hear from you, or results have been quiet and you're not sending us an email back, or
Hmm.
any number of things, because I mean we'll be the first to tell you if things are going quiet. Like
Yeah.
if something is amiss, you're going to hear from us before we hear from you. That's
Mm.
just the way it
Mm.
is, because we have to get to the bottom of that. And if that happens and we don't hear from you, it's like, okay, maybe things are going amiss because you're not answering the phone.
That's
Did you
right.
disappear? Like,
Yes.
conversions don't track if you don't pick the phone up, right?
Right.
So
Yes. Right. Yeah. You gotta, but it's, yeah. So it becomes, I totally, you just kind of, you get ghosted and it's like, yeah, it's sort of tough. where do you see, you mentioned AI,
Hmm.
and it seems that I've only been following it from a distance. I haven't been on, was it Chat GPT or
Chat GPT. Yep.
GPT? I haven't even been on the site.
Hmm.
So I'm not a Luddite. I'm, in terms of the curve, I'm what's called a slow adopter. I'm not
Sure.
going to be on the
Yeah.
bleeding edge. I kind of wait till the curve works out. Do you think that but it does seem, because, Google's stock price has kind of taken a little bit of a hit
Hmm.
with this, it seems, in that, do you think that this is going to be a disruptor into the marketing community, or is this just sort of a flash in the pan? I mean, what do you see I mean, you're put on your crystal ball, of course, and where do you see some of this technology going?
What I think will happen is I don't think it'll be necessarily a disruptor in the marketing community as a whole,
Hmm.
but what it's going to disrupt is the people who are uh, old school, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
People who stick to the SEO strategies and the PPC strategies and the content strategies and the communication strategies that they've used for years are going to find themselves losing to people who seem like they're new into the game, but really what they are is adapting faster to the changes.
Right.
One
Okay.
of the biggest one of the biggest fears that I hear from people in regards to AI, and this is a completely justified fear, it's a very real thing,
Hmm.
is it taking away jobs from creatives, from people who would go out there and write ads, from people who would go out
Right.
there. And so
Right.
while I see that as a valid concern,
Hmm.
I think what will actually happen is that the tools that are being made available will make good creatives better, and it will make people who are just doing middle of the line work irrelevant.
So you're going to see a hollowing out. You're going to have, so it's only the people at the top end who are going to benefit, which we've seen in, and I guess in code
Mhm.
writing as well. Is that you have the code has gotten to a place where if you're just a beginner, then a lot of things are just, template, boilerplate. You're out
Yep.
of a job. But if you're at the high end, you still have a place, because the templates aren't going to cover all that. And so there's this hollowing out. So you really have to be either the best or you're like nothing.
Right.
Is that's kind
I
of like, and so
I I
that
think
will
the
cost jobs. And so now
yeah,
those people have got to find a place to work. Yeah.
absolutely. I think the website and the code example is an excellent way to relate this, because
Hmm.
there was a while there, and from the dot-com boom on to maybe 2008 2009,
Right.
where websites were a mystery to people who weren't code nerds.
Right.
And then as things got easy and Wix got good and
Hmm.
WordPress and Squarespace, all these tools got put in place, it made a decent website really accessible to just about anyone who wanted to put one
Right.
up.
Yeah.
But what that also did was the best of the best website designers and software developers really differentiated themselves, because all of these other people could only do these templated websites, and the best coders can go in and do whatever they want.
Right. Right.
And you'll see the
Yeah.
exact same thing with AI and content creation and writing. But for me, the biggest recommendation I can make to people is try it. See if it's something you can embrace. If it's something that you can't get past because you hate the idea of what it's doing to an industry, then don't use it. But be cognizant of the fact that good people are going to learn to use those tools very well. And it might result in you getting left behind. And at the end of the day, I want to see people succeed and I want to see people win. And if that means using a tool like Chat GPT so you
Hmm.
can write out write agreements faster, that's something that I see people doing, is using a tool like Chat GPT to write their agreements, because
Oh,
it can
okay.
you can go in and ask it, say, write a customer agreement for a wildlife removal job that'll take an estimated 3 days and cost $3,000, and it'll spit out a decent agreement that you can then go in and change.
Edit.
But if you didn't have that before, now you've got to spend all of that time writing out an agreement, or you have to pay someone to create that agreement for you, versus You could have just had it done in 10 seconds had you adopted the technology. So
Yeah. So how does that work with the copyright? I guess that's where I'm, I guess I guess I would be called a creative, although I don't necessarily think of myself as that creative. I'm really a
sure.
content organizer because of some of my books. But where does copyright infringement come in with some of this stuff? I mean, I
Mhm.
guess the contract would be hard to prove because there's boilerplate contracts out there. But from what I understand, and again, I haven't been on the website. I got too many other things to
Sure.
do, and but nevertheless, I mean, I've heard that there's been some pretty powerful stuff that it's done. Like you can tell it to do a sonnet, and it'll
Oh,
create write a
absolutely.
poetry for you and do haiku, and this is, I mean, it's
This
kind of amazing.
so I will take a step back from wildlife removal and marketing for just a
Hmm.
second to just to speak to the AI side of things, because
Yeah,
outside of marketing, this is something that I'm really deeply intrigued in, and I think it's an interesting subject. I think the biggest change that AI is going to have, the biggest impact, is probably to US copyright law,
hmm.
because
Okay,
as things are written right now, copyright protects mode of delivery,
okay,
meaning the ideas and thoughts within copywritten material are not protected.
right,
The method of delivery is. So
right,
I can't take a book that was written and I can't take a segment of that book and publish it somewhere else and call that mine.
right, right.
However, the machine doesn't do that. The machine analyzes patterns in speech and writing and then takes the ideas and rephrases them and rewrites them. You can run just about anything that ChatGPT spits out through a plagiarism checker and it'll pass every time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
so I think one of the big things, one of the big impacts that AI is going to have is probably on copyright law. And I liken this kind of to, there's a really interesting example that comes from the music industry, actually, in terms of copyright and infringement and subject matter and ideas versus method of delivery, which is David Bowie's Space Odyssey
Mm,
versus Major Tom, which was a song that came much later. Two songs about the exact same fictional character that had nothing to do with each other, that one artist later said, yes, I based it on this, but it was not an infringible case because the method of delivery was completely different. It was a different song, same ideas, same subject matter, but the lyrics were different enough. The song was a completely different song. And
yeah.
so there was nothing infringible there, even though it was an original fictional idea in the original song that was then kind of riffed upon and made new throughout a new piece of work. That's a lot of what AI is doing right now, is it's taking existing work, and I hate the phrase changing it enough, because that implies that there is some kind of a threshold, because there's not a threshold, but it's delivering the material differently.
Sure, but I think with the challenge, like with music, and I don't think it's the same thing
Mhm.
for, written text, but with music, I mean, haven't there been lawsuits even over like certain chords of, I think they came up with a rule that you can like copy, what is it, 8 notes or something and not
Sure.
get in trouble. I mean, it's kind of a very arbitrary this,
Hmm.
uh, and so, but with music, because there's so much repetition in that, and there are chords, and you kind of wonder like how different does something have to be in order to bypass that? I think it's a little bit easier with text because sometimes you can just change a couple of words and you're kind of good to go.
Well,
Um,
I think you're absolutely right there, and
yeah,
I liken it to textbooks. Even if ideas were copyrightable and protectable, no two textbooks would cover the same subject, because
right.
that first textbook would be the only one. It would be the be all end all, and
Mm,
we'd have to use only that one. And so I think you're absolutely right when it comes to written material, and this harkens back to why I think AI will impact copyright law significantly. I think that there has to be some changes to recognize and protect ideas as they get written, and how we do that probably crosses more over into patent world than it does copyright world. So it'll be interesting to see if there becomes a new segment of intellectual patents
yeah,
versus
because
use.
Because certainly with someone in, and let's get back to the wildlife control field, if
Yeah.
someone wanted to just simply go to Chat GPTI or GPT and
Mhm.
say, how do I remove a raccoon? I would suspect, I haven't tried it. I mean,
Mhm.
certainly people can do that. They probably could get themselves a little step-by-step guide on how to remove that raccoon, and it might even be tied to the laws in their particular state. I would assume if the computer strength is strong enough to do that kind of search. So it's kind of like my future, because I do a lot of how-to writing.
Mhm.
That's why have me.
Well, if it puts your mind at ease at all,
Yeah.
uh, I am not shy about saying that we have given it our best effort to utilize AI in this industry,
Hmm.
and it really misses the mark.
Does it really?
Yeah,
I suspect that may change in 5
it
years, though.
it
I just
it
need to retire soon enough.
it may change, but I'll this will cause another rabbit hole, but we'll
Sure.
get there.
Okay. All right.
Um, it may change, but what I actually think will happen is the AIs will get taken over by marketers the same way Google search has. Meaning,
Okay.
one of the things we're thinking about is if I go on and ask ChatGPT and I say, how would I get a raccoon out of my attic? If that thing recognizes that I am in Cleveland, Ohio, I would like to think that at some point in time down the road, the machine is going to start optimizing against local information.
Okay.
And so this is where I think search marketing will end up, is that if someone goes into an AI tool and asks how to do a particular thing in a location, marketers will take it over. And eventually you're going to have people who know how to get the machine to train on what they want it to train on. And so then I can get it to spit out and say, if you need a raccoon out of your attic, you can do this step, this step, this step. And the fourth step is going to be, or if you want it done
Call.
today, call my client in Cleveland.
Call so and so. Yeah. Oh,
Right.
I got you. Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah.
Because the
Okay.
machine as it is right now, it misses the mark a lot. And to make up for that, it often adds in a step that's like, call a professional.
Mm,
But it
right.
doesn't specify a professional because the machine itself. So ChatGPT's language model was trained on the website Reddit.
Okay.
So yeah, so everything that was ever written and documented on Reddit
Mm.
is somewhere rattling around in the Chat GPT
Chat
machine.
GPT. Wow. That's just amazing.
And so there's not a lot of wildlife removal talk on Reddit, but there's a ton of law and medical talk. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
Chat GPT is very good at law and medical, but
Oh,
it's
no
not so
kidding.
good at wildlife removal.
Yeah. Well, that's good news, at least for
Mhm.
people like me. So if someone decides to say, look, we want to call Lead Squirrel,
Mhm.
I think we're gonna, dial in and we're gonna call Lead Squirrel. Uh, what things should the person sort of have in hand? Maybe they already have it in their memory, but what things should they have in hand so that when they can make that call timely and profitable and give you the tools that you need to hit the ground running and move on? What things would they need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, step back and recognize what your goals are.
Okay.
If you can come with a tangible goal in mind, meaning is there a particular number of calls you're looking to achieve per month, an additional revenue level that you'd like to add per month? If
Okay.
you have a tangible goal in mind, that gives us a good idea as to how best we can help. The next thing that you can come with that will be immensely helpful is any existing information that you have out there on the web. So if you've got a website, come with that URL. If you've got a Google business profile, let us know how to find that, meaning what's your exact business name on Google so we can see that. Because there's this big mystery thing out there where agencies offer audits and all kinds of stuff, and then you wait 7 days and they spit you back some information. They're just
Mm.
repurposing things that tools are spitting out to them. And so
Okay.
we'll do that in real time on a call. We don't need to waste
Yeah.
7 days with an
Sure.
audit.
Sure.
Call us, and
Mhm.
you're going to get myself, or you're going to get my business partner Keelan, and either one of us is going to be able to take your information and say, hey, here's what you're doing really, really well. Here's what could be improved. If you want this number of calls, here's where we think that we could probably help best. Because
Mm.
for us, it's never about, I mean, let's call it what it is. Everybody gets into business to make money,
Right.
but at the end of the day, the industry is not huge, right? And so
Right.
for us, it's how do we better an industry as a whole versus how do we work with 5 people and make, and have 5 clients?
Sure.
Because if the entire industry grows, then we grow by default. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And so
Absolutely.
if we can if we can have an honest conversation about what your goals are, and you can provide us resources to take a look at and say what you're doing well and what you're not, and you're willing to listen to that feedback and do something about it, then I think that we'll be off and running in real short order.
Yeah. And I think and that's good. I would hope, and just to, if I can just sort of throw this in, and when you come
Sure.
with a tangible goal, like how many calls you wanted, I think it would be, I would just want to encourage listeners that you want to be sure that you have a number of how many successful conversions you could handle.
Yes.
You may
Yeah.
want, let's say I want 200 more calls in a month, which is fine, but let's say you converted, 25% of those. Do you have the manpower to service those calls? Otherwise,
Right.
you're just getting swamped, and you've been totally, so you want to be realistic in what your goals are without
Right.
getting, don't set a
Exactly.
bar so
And
high that you're like, you're drinking from a fire hydrant, and it's just not going to work. Yeah.
well,
So that,
and to that, I think there's something to be said for someone who's willing to be realistic about the numbers that they have in
mm,
mind,
yeah.
right? Because if you want to only run Google ads, if that's all you want to do is Google ads, for instance,
Mhm.
and we go on to Google's keyword planner and we see that your average cost per click is $25, right? You're in a competitive market, you got a high cost per click. If we go on and we see that, right? Now we have to say it's going to be $250 for you to get 10 clicks. With a 20% conversion rate, 2 of those are going to call you. You now have to have a 50% close rate for that to make sense.
Right.
Do you have that? And if you do, is that call going to be worth $250 to you?
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to be willing to be realistic about the numbers. And if your market isn't a good fit or it's super competitive, you have to be willing to spend more to play against some of these other guys. Now, that's not always the case. And actually, oddly enough, on the board behind me was the last video we did for our emails,
Mm.
is the 3 things you can do to improve your conversion rate and bring your cost per click down, which
Right.
is intent, copy and creative, and customer experience. You want to make sure that those 3 things are in alignment at all times, regardless of what marketing you're doing, regardless of what channel you're on, whether it's Google ads, Facebook ads, you're putting something in the newspaper, whatever it is. You want to make sure that the people who see that ad have a particular intent, meaning they've got wildlife problem that they need to get out.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that your copy or your ad creative matches that intent, meaning you're calling out the fact that you do that professionally, and that the customer experience on the back end of whatever action you ask them to take leads them to believe that you are the right person
Yeah.
to do that job,
Yeah.
right? If those 3 things are in alignment, your conversion rates are going to be great and your cost per clicks are going to come down. If you're doing PPC ads, you're going to have better overall SEO because Google takes customer experience into account. All of those things are going to play well. So if you've got those 3 things in alignment, your marketing is on a really good track.
Sure. Sure. So you wanted to be sure that people come with you with a tangible goal, their URL. I would assume you would also need access to if they have a website, so you could access the back end of that website.
Yeah,
So username, password,
yeah,
access.
if you've got those things, and so generally speaking, what we've seen is on first call, most people aren't comfortable letting us in to see, they just want to have a conversation. So if you
Right.
want to call and you want to have a conversation, throw us your URL, throw us your Google business profile. We've got tools we can use to see how you're doing SEO wise, and maybe even see some Google ads that you're running if you're running Google ads. Otherwise, if you want to get more in depth, be prepared to give us read access to analytics and Google ads so we can see how your traffic's getting to your website, where they're
Yeah.
coming from, what your Google ads cost per clicks and conversions are, what keywords you're bidding on, because along with intent, copy, and customer experience, right?
Right.
If you're bidding on wildlife removal as a broad match keyword in Google ads, you're going to have all kinds of traffic that has no intent, right? We want to make sure that you're getting the most intentional people to your website, whether that's from Facebook, whether that's from Google, whether that's from your SEO or anything else that you're doing. So be prepared to give us a little bit of insight into those things. And if you're not comfortable doing that on call number one, we understand, and that's totally okay. But at least throw us your URL and your Google business profile so we can give you some insights into where we think we could improve.
Anything that we haven't talked about that we want to be sure that we do cover before we finish up? And just for those who may have come in a little late, just we're talking to Tate Morgan. He's the president of Lead Squirrel, and you can find him at leadsquirrel.org. I love the name. It's Leads. I like squirrels, so you can see a squirrel in my logo. It's not showing, but that's the bottom end of a squirrel in there. I like squirrels, but it's a rat with a bushy tail, and the tail does make the difference, right? So
it's amazing how much of a difference that tail makes.
Does. Yeah, it's amazing. So anything that we should have covered that you want to be sure that the audience understands about your company and your services, or anything you want to leave them with?
Nothing comes to mind just as of yet. The only thing that I will say is we have a resource out there. Again, I'm huge on DIY. Anyone in wildlife removal knows that DIY is kind of the worst thing ever. The last thing you want to hear is your client say, "Oh, we'll just do this ourselves," because you know they're going to call you in 3 months. But for me, right, I think that there's plenty of capable operators who can successfully DIY some of their marketing. So if you're at ground zero and you've done no marketing yet, there are a lot of resources out there. And one thing that we've put together is our 2023 animal removal marketing cheat sheet. It's a pretty extensive document, but it breaks down kind of the foundation, the website stuff, and then the 5 core pillars. There's a checklist associated with each of the 5 pillars that gives you kind of a frame of reference for all of the things you should have in place. And how to do some of those important things. There's some links to some training videos and some SOPs in there. That's free. You can get that by signing up on our blog page on our website. So if you go to animalcontrolmarketing.com, we've got the link to our blog right there in the menu. If you go over there, drop your email and we'll send you that cheat sheet. It's completely free. It's not there's nothing, no sale associated with it or anything like that. It's just a resource that we want people to have, because we think, again, as the industry grows, we grow by default. And if we want to be realistic about it, I mean, that's beneficial to everybody.
Oh, absolutely. So that is a free checklist and strategy guide for people doing their own marketing, and that's at animalcontrolmarketing.com. Just go to the blog area, put in your email, and you can get access to this particular document for those of you that want to just sort of see the plan and get something started. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. Sometimes when you raise the standards for the industry, it helps everybody, even though you may have lost some low-hanging fruit. You're getting better work all the way across, and that can certainly be helpful. Training often does the same thing in terms of just raising the standard across the board, without a doubt. So again, that's animalcontrolmarketing.com. So go to the blog and you can put in your email address and get this free guide on doing some of your own marketing. Well, Tate, it's been great to have you on board. And so let's just make sure we get your information out there. Again, this has been Tate. We've been talking to Tate Morgan. He's the president of Lead Squirrel. You can find him at leadsquirrel.org. That's LEAD squirrel, like tree squirrels.org. So leadsquirrel.org, or you can also go to animalcontrolmarketing.com for some additional information. So thanks for coming along and talking about your company and some of the services that you provide people. And hopefully they'll be able to if you do contact them, let them know that our wildlife show here referred them over to you. We'd certainly appreciate it. We don't make any money on it, folks, so we just want to be sure. We like to have people know that they're getting referred from us because of our show, and we'd be glad to have that. Again, you've been listening to Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and if you can give us a review, we would love to have that. You can also download the podcast at Rumble. Just go to Wildlife Control Consultant on Rumble, and you can get the podcast there as well. If you have comments, questions, yes, even criticisms, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to be on the show, or if you have other ideas for the show, definitely reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So we want to make sure we're giving the information out to the industry that's going to be helpful for you. Otherwise, you're just going to listen to what I want to talk about. So we'd love to hear from you. And again, this is Living the Wildlife. Why living the wildlife? Because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everybody.